all ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, then I'll get started. All right, so the topic of my presentation is covered in Chapter 6 of Kellogg on Marketing, which discusses creating and managing brands. And I'll start by just giving you an overview of where we're going to go in the discussion today. Essentially, I have 3 segments to my presentation. The first segment is going to be an overview of some of the important branding concepts that the authors discussed in Kellogg on Marketing. The second segment of my presentation will be a more in-depth discussion of my focus topic, which is brand equity and the role that it plays in creating value for businesses. And the final segment of my presentation is going to hopefully be a discussion activity where we can actually do some brand equity examples, and hopefully that will help illustrate the concepts that we've been discussing a little bit more in depth. So I'll start with section 1, and the question, what is a brand? Defining what a brand actually means. Now the word brand is actually derived from an Old Norse word, brandur, which meant to burn. And it entered our language through the practice of cattle ranchers who would brand their cattle to claim ownership. Today, of course, it has a very different meaning in our culture. Brands are ubiquitous. Most of us can think of probably over 100 brands just off the top of our heads. The American Marketing Association defines a brand as a name, a term, a design, a symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or services as different from that of other sellers in the market. So essentially, to me, what this means, if we dig a little deeper here, is that brands are about psychology. So human psychology uses names to identify people, places, and things. Brands serve the same purpose for businesses, products, and services. So as an example, if you were to walk in the classroom and try to describe me, you could refer to me as the tall white person at the front of the classroom giving the presentation in a white shirt. Or you could simply say, look at Chad. In the same way, if I was to describe the car that I drive to you, I could describe it as a white 2005 four-door sedan, or I could simply tell you I drive a Toyota. And each of those short words is endowed with rich meaning for each of us. So if you were to tell my mother, for instance, that you watched Chad give a presentation today, simply by saying that one word, Chad, a whole lifetime of memories, associations, thoughts, and feelings is tied up in that word. In the same way, when you say the word Toyota, there's a whole lifetime of consumer exposure, thoughts, feelings, and attributes that you assign to that one word. That, in essence, is the value of a brand. It is a unique identifier for businesses and products. So why is this all important? Well, it's important because brands operate in a market. And in the market, products and services can be imitated, they can be copied, and ultimately they exist in a competitive market space. But brands are unique. They are protected, and businesses can invest in their brands in order to develop their identities and the association that they have with their customers. So a great example of this would be the bottled water market. This is a market where there are multiple competitors all selling what is essentially the same product, but they do so by differentiating each of their brands. So each competitor in the market is able to carve out a unique niche in that space that allows customers to identify them as different from their competitors. So that ultimately is where the value of brands exists, is the ability to differentiate and identify yourself as an abstract business entity in the market. By giving yourself a brand, all of that is simplified into one conceptual idea. So how do you create a brand? Well, I'll suggest 4 primary phases that Roger Best discussed in his marketing textbook. The first phase is really all about creation. And that has to do with creating a product, identifying the product, giving it a name, which provides a verbal expression of that brand, giving it a logo, which provides a visual expression. All of these things tie together in the creative development of the brand. The second phase is about protection, using copyright, trademark, and patent law, as well as reserving domain names and any other proprietary features of the brand to protect those. The more protection that you can give a brand, the more you are able to differentiate it in the market and protect it from your competitors. And as a result, the more value that brand ultimately has for you in creating business value. The third phase is alignment. So this is choosing pricing strategies, positioning, distribution channels, which all align with each other, create synergy, and support the identity of your brand in the market. And then only after going through these first 3 initial steps do we then reach the 4th phase, which is promotion. And that is the phase at which your brand is ready to actually then enter the market and meet customers for the first time. And that happens through advertising, sales, and public relations efforts. So that's the moment where your brand actually floats out into reality and encounters the customers on the other end. Now, the authors of Kellogg on Marketing discuss this concept called the brand continuum. And the brand continuum is kind of an abstract conceptual framework for understanding the types of brands that exist out there in the world. Branding, it's important to understand, is a dynamic concept. And so essentially the brand continuum tries to express that by creating a spectrum, which at one end is product focused, and at the other end is customer focused. Now within that spectrum, they suggest 3 sort of mega categories of brands. Functional brands aligned with the product focus end of the spectrum. So these are brands that compete on superior performance or superior economy in their product. They really focus on the product itself. At the far end of the spectrum, experiential brands, the experience of those brands is integrated with the actual experience of the customer. So for instance, a classic example here would be Disneyland or Disney. The thoughts and feelings that you experience while you are interacting with that brand. In the middle, image brands project an image associated with those brands. So it could be an image of esteem, it could be an image of aspiration or elitism. The image itself doesn't necessarily have to relate to the product itself, but the image that is used creates some sort of associative effect that creates interest in the brand itself. Now, like any spectrum, okay, to be in this spectrum, you don't necessarily have to fit cleanly in any one of these 3 mega categories. But as you manage your brand and manage your business, it's valuable to understand where you locate in this continuum, because it allows you to understand your brand better, to understand your customers better, and ultimately to understand your business model and the way that you create value for customers. So it's a dynamic conceptual framework for understanding brand management. Now the final kind of big subject that I want to discuss from the chapter relates to brand architecture. And brand architecture refers to the ways that companies manage their brands. So there are essentially 3 big categories of brand architecture. And they relate to three specific strategies. The first strategy is product branding. So product branding, a classic example would be Procter & Gamble. So Procter & Gamble offers a wide range of products in the consumer market, Tide, Crest, Pampers, others. You don't necessarily know that these are Procter & Gamble products. The product itself is the brand, not the company, okay? And the positive of that is that it allows Procter & Gamble to segment the market and really creates the greatest degree of flexibility for Procter & Gamble to provide a wide range of products in a variety of market segments that are all targeted to their specific segment. Now, the downside of product branding is that it's expensive. Each product that you create requires the investment in marketing resources to develop a unique brand around that specific product. Now, in the middle, the second strategy is family branding. So family branding is branding by familiarity and association. A good example of this is Gillette. So Gillette offers a variety of products in the shaving category, and the likelihood is if you use one Gillette product, that when you go to the grocery store and look at other potential products like shaving cream or aftershave or something like that, your familiarity with Gillette is going to create the greater likelihood that you're going to buy another one of Gillette's same products. Now, the downside of family branding is the possibility of cannibalization. So you have to be aware when you offer products that they aren't cannibalizing market share from each other. The final strategy is corporate branding. Corporate branding, some good examples of this would be Nike, Sony, Caterpillar. Essentially, the corporate brand is where you don't necessarily know the names of the products, but what you know is the company who has created or manufactured those products. Okay? That makes that brand extremely powerful. So every product that Nike offers is branded as Nike. You don't necessarily know what the specific name of your shoes are, but you know that they are Nike shoes. Now, the advantages of corporate branding is that creates, if you have a positive, if you have a high value brand, the value of that brand extends to every product in your business. It's simple, it's cost effective, and it's inclusive to create a corporate branding strategy. The challenge is it's inflexible. So if Nike wanted to enter into a new business area, they would need to do so with the Nike brand. And if that new business area doesn't align with their existing brand, that could create problems for them. So that kind of gives you a 10,000-foot overview of some of the topics that were discussed in the branding chapter. I know we have at least one other person here who will be giving another presentation related to branding later. But I want to move into the second part of my presentation, which focuses on the topic of brand equity. Now, brand equity is a complex and somewhat elusive subject, as we'll discover. It's received a lot of focus in academic literature because it is, I think, so elusive and abstract. So some of the things we'll be getting into are somewhat abstract and difficult to communicate at times. But essentially, what we're looking at is four primary questions. What is brand equity? How does brand equity create economic value? We'll look at a couple of examples of academic models of brand equity, and then we'll finally address how to integrate brand equity measures in a way that I think is meaningful from research. So there are actually several definitions of brand equity out there, but the one that I wanted to provide to you is Keller's definition, which is basically that brand equity is about differential effect. So if you have a product sitting there with no brand on it, the customer has a baseline perception of that product category. What is the value created by slapping a brand on that product? So when the customer sees that brand, what is the effect in their mind? It could either be a positive differential or it could be a negative differential. If it is a positive differential, it could be a large positive differential, or it could be a less large positive differential. So it can be a variable effect. Ultimately, though, brand equity lives in the mind of the customer. It's a psychological reaction to seeing that brand identity associated with your product. Does that make sense? Do people agree with that?
Yeah. So it's all about perception from the customer's point of view.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so hard to discuss. That's what makes it so abstract, as we'll see. So why try to get at brand equity? Why is it valuable? Why is it important to look at and discuss? Well, there are 5 reasons here that were laid out by Alouati, Lehman, and Nesland, who will look at their model in a little bit. But the 5 reasons they lay out, first off, it provides a guide to marketing strategy and tactical decisions. If we understand the way that the brand equity of our product operates in the mind of our customers, we can make marketing decisions that more directly influence the way that that psychology is playing out. The second reason, it assesses the extendability of a brand. So, is there opportunity for growth in our brand category? Is there the opportunity to extend our brand into a new product area? We learn these things by understanding what type of equity we are creating with our customers. The third reason is to evaluate the effectiveness of marketing decisions. So ultimately trying to communicate from a marketing manager's perspective the value that you've created by investing in a whole different range of marketing activities. The fourth reason is to track brand health compared to competitors. Studying brand equity can be a valuable way to learn about the market in which your product competes. And then finally, the gold standard for many finance people is that studying brand equity helps us try to assign a financial value to the brand. Now that's an elusive topic which could be its own dissertation in and of itself, but ultimately that's what a lot of finance people especially are interested in. Before we get into this too deeply, I want to discuss the brand value chain. The brand value chain is a widely regarded model created by Keller and Lehman, which shows the effect of brand equity through the market experience. So what you need to start with is the blue boxes at the top. The blue boxes represent 4 different phases, starting at the corporate level with an investment made in marketing programs. That transitions to the customer mindset, okay? So your marketing investment affects the customer mindset. The customer mindset affects the brand performance in the market. The brand performance affects shareholder value. Now, what's really valuable about the brand value chain is they have these things multipliers. And what is so effective about this model is that these multipliers really interject and show that as you move from each blue box to the next, there is a transition taking place in the market. And so these multipliers represent program quality, marketplace conditions, and investor sentiment. So that is basically demonstrating that you can invest in a marketing program, but ultimately the impact on customer mindset is determined by the quality of your marketing program. The better quality marketing program that you develop, the more you're going to impact customer mindset. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because this whole portion, especially here in the middle, from customer mindset to brand performance, this is where brand equity exists. We don't really know what it is, how it works. There's a lot of discussion on that topic. But we know somewhere in here the magic happens. And that's what we're trying to get at, is somewhere in this structure here, understanding where brand equity takes its effects. So now we'll dive a little bit more deeply into brand equity itself. So to start with, I want to just kind of frame our reference. There's been a lot of academic discussion on this topic. This study by Mirzay, Gray, and Bauman estimated that there are over 300 plus models of brand equity that exists in academic literature. They provided a summary list of just a few of them here that I'm sharing. And I'm not going to go into any particular detail on this list here, but I just want to give you a sense of the scope of the discussion that's taking place in the academic literature, to say that there is a lot out there. In addition, there are also some very important industry models of brand equity, which I think you should also know about in relation to this topic. I've listed 4 of the better known ones here: the Young and Rubicam Brand Asset Valuator, Interbrand, Millward Brown's Brand Dynamic, and Equity Engine. So these are models which are very common in the advertising industry itself as measures of brand value and brand equity. So now we'll get into a discussion about brand equity in more depth. At a high level here, brand equity, the academic models of brand equity essentially focus on the conversation of 2 types of measures. On the one hand, you have customer mindset measures in the blue column. On the other hand, you have product market measures in the green column. I'll start with customer mindset measures. Customer mindset measures are soft, attitudinal measures that are typically survey-based in terms of actually gathering the information. They look at topics like brand awareness, brand associations, brand attitude, brand attachment, and brand activity. Now, the great strengths of customer mindset measures are that they are information-rich and customer-focused. Again, remember, brand equity lives in the minds of the customer. These get into the minds of the customer and try to extract information from that source. Now, the problem with customer mindset measures is that the data gathering process is complex. It's expensive, labor-intensive, cost-intensive, and the data that you get out is often hard to interpret, especially in business metrics. And we'll see that once we look at specific models in a moment. The other problem with customer mindset measures is they tend to be a lagging response. So changes in brand equity may not be reflected as quickly in customer mindset measures as others. So product market measures are different from customer mindset measures in that product market measures are derived from information that is in the market itself. So this is things like price premium, revenue premium, volume premium, market share, profit premium. These are typical measures of product market brand equity. Now, the great strength of product market measures is that this is information that most businesses have anyway as a cost of doing business. So that means that marketing managers have this information as easily accessible and can track this on an ongoing basis. Product market measures also tend to be a leading response. So you will see a change much more quickly than you would in the customer mindset measurement area. Now, the big problem with product market measures is the lack of diagnosis. They tell you what is happening, but not necessarily why it is happening in the market. They also use hypotheticals, especially some of these premium measures, and I'll show you one in a moment. Premium measures use hypothetical measurement constructs, which can be debated as to, well, should we do this or should we do that? And we'll talk about that in a moment. But generally speaking, from a 10,000-foot level, these 2 categories of measurement are essentially the toolboxes, the tools in the toolbox that we have to try to dig into this subject and get our hands on what is brand equity. So the first model that I'll share with you is the Brand Equity 10, which was developed by Aker. And the Brand Equity 10 consists of 10 measures. And what Aker suggests is that brand equity is essentially 4-dimensional. There are dimensions of awareness, perceived quality, loyalty, differentiation, and association. And so what Aker suggests is if you are going to investigate brand equity, you need to select at least one measure from each dimension of brand equity. So if you chose only perceived quality assessments, for instance, you would get a skewed understanding of the information out there. You need to do a holistic four-dimensional investigation in order to understand the full dimensions of brand equity. So that's the Aker model. He also has market behavior measures, which are kind of a fifth category, but overall his main point is this four-dimensional quality. Now most people associate Aker with being fairly customer mindset centric, okay? And here is a second customer mindset centric model. This is the hierarchy of effects model from Lehman, Keller, and Farley. And essentially what they say is, hold on a second. When we're talking about brand equity, we're essentially talking about one thing, and that is the purchase process, right? The purchase decision. And that is a classic, in their opinion, hierarchy of effects situation, where it's not multidimensional, like Aker explains with his four dimensions, but what they suggest is that the brand equity process is fundamentally one-directional or unidirectional. All of these things are moving in the same direction, but that these different, what they call factors, are interrelated. And so what they try to do is actually develop coefficients to show and understand the relationship between these different pathways. So if you look at this, they actually looked at 27 different variables. They condensed these down into 6 factors, and then they plotted these coefficient pathways. So if you look here, for instance, the pathway from comprehension to comparative advantage to preference and attachment is the strongest pathway of all in terms of creating brand equity in the market. There are other possibilities, though, including interpersonal relations and history. All 3 of these all end in preference. And preference in turn leads to attachment. So what they define here is comprehension is the same as awareness. Comparative advantage, interpersonal relations, and history are analogous to interest. Desire is associated with preference, and action, the decision to actually buy that product, is associated with attachment. Michael?
Where did the numbers come from? Like, are we talking about correlations among the different things, or like what makes the outside one the most preferable? Is it because everything just has the highest values?
Yeah, so they did a least squares coefficient model, and they basically put together these mega factors and looked at the way, so each of these factors consists of these different variables as well that were incorporated into each of them, okay? So it's a little bit abstract, for sure. But it's essentially, the main point to understand is that it's a unidirectional model, okay? So the last model that I want to share is revenue premium. And this is fundamentally different from what we've just looked at. So this is a product market measure model. And you can tell just by looking at it that it's different than the customer mindset measures that we've just looked at. And mathematically speaking, it's fairly simple. The revenue premium is defined as, so your product is product B, okay? And the revenue premium is defined as the volume of B times the price of B, your revenue, minus the volume of a comparative times the price of a comparative, okay? And that differential is described as the revenue premium, okay? Theoretically, this is the brand equity that you are creating. Now, I mentioned the use of hypotheticals in relation to product market measures. So this is what I'm talking about. So ideally, this PM. So what that describes is a private label. Ideally, what they suggest is to use a private label. But private labels aren't necessarily available in every industry. Therefore, you have to make a decision about what is your comparative product or company that you want to use in your revenue premium calculation. And that gets into a whole bunch of different issues that may influence and even damage the validity of this measurement. The thing that's really valuable about the revenue premium, though, is that it incorporates two other sets of data that are in themselves considered to sometimes be measures of product market brand equity. So you're measuring both volume and price are represented in that value of the revenue premium metric.
Chad, is there any statistical work that's been done to show the accuracy of the equations you're using here, or where are there places where it's been decided to accurately predict?
Well, I'm about to get into that, actually. And that was related to the most recent research that I wanted to share, which is this study done by Huang and Saragaldo last year. And they did some really interesting research comparing different measures, correlating different measures, product market measures of brand equity with customer mindset measures. And what they found was a high level of correlation between revenue premium and customer mindset. And so what they extrapolate from that is that if you see something happening in revenue premium with the revenue premium metric, the likelihood is you're also, if you use customer mindset evaluations, you are going to uncover something going on at the customer mindset level as well. And so what they draw from this is a recommendation for marketing managers. And the recommendation is that marketing managers should really use both types of measures, customer mindset measures and product market measures, to evaluate brand equity, but they should use them in fundamentally different ways. So they recommend that a marketing manager should use a product market measure, ideally something that's highly correlated like revenue premium, to do ongoing monitoring of brand equity. That data is easily available. It's a metric that can be set up and monitored on an ongoing basis. But if they detect changes in brand equity using product market measures, that they should then employ customer mindset measures to evaluate what's actually happening, go deeper in the market, and try to uncover what is actually happening. So essentially, if we think about this in terms of the brand value chain, which I've located here along the bottom, what they are essentially recommending is that you monitor your brand equity at the level of brand performance using a product market measure like revenue premium. But that, if you need more rich information, you drill backwards through the brand value chain and you focus your evaluation efforts here at the customer mindset level to try to figure out what is actually going on. So that's kind of the accumulation of their study. Their study was not about developing a new model, but it was about trying to find interrelationships between models and trying to distill a practical application for these models that could be used by marketing managers. Okay? So if we back up to the beginning, I'm at the end of the second portion of my presentation, and I just want to revisit some of the high points, so the main points that I've made with you today. The first is to remember that brands create unique identities for businesses and products. That's ultimately where brands are able to differentiate businesses in a way that creates value and meaning. Brand equity is an intangible asset that drives customer response, and that measuring brand equity helps customers understand their customers and the market. And then finally, brand equity should be monitored using product market data, but variation should be investigated using customer mindset measures. So That was a lot of very abstract information. And does that register with people? Does that make sense? Is there something that you can take away from that that's valuable? Okay? You look like you have a question.
Yeah, I do. How much do you see this being utilized in businesses out there today for your research?
Well, that's the challenge. When you have 300 different academic models, there's been a lot of abstract discussion on the topic, and I think, you know, in a business environment, people want to understand more succinctly what their brand equity is actually creating for customers. Some of that relates to Brian's presentation that he gave earlier today in terms of marketing research. How much capacity does a business have to do that? And how abstract can they be in that research in terms of understanding their customers? But you're right, that's why I think the article by Huang and Sorogalu really tried to get at what is a meaningful application for this, understanding the complexity of the topic. I mean, that ultimately is the challenge with brand equity. We know it's there, we see its effects, but to really understand it, we have to get inside the head of our customers, which is not a time or cost-efficient thing to do oftentimes. So, to understand this last point more clearly, using product market measures and customer mindset measures, I want to lead two activities with you. The first is a price premium activity, and the second is a customer mindset activity. So price premium is going to be a product market example. Customer mindset will be more customer mindset focused. And the scenario is this. You're in the market for a new car, okay? And you're looking at two options, okay? You're looking at either the 2015 Toyota Camry LE, Kelley Blue Book price $20,770, or you're looking at the 2015 BMW 740i, Kelley Blue Book price $67,959, okay? Now, for this activity, the price premium activity specifically, okay, we are going to assume that you have enough money to buy either car, potentially. But you do not have so much money that you're just throwing money around and it doesn't really matter to you. So in other words, if you decide to reach for the BMW, it should be something that you really want, okay, and desire, okay?
Chad, can you explain that a little more just to get my mind right now? Am I a millionaire, am I a billionaire, or am I, you know?
Let's
Because
put it
that's
this
a big
way.
difference
Okay,
on which
here's
one
an
I
example.
choose.
Here's an example. Your grandmother gave you $50,000.
Okay.
So you have $50,000. So you've got a little bit of a windfall.
Right.
Okay. But if you're going to spend that $50,000, it's going to be on something that you really want.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Does that help? So I just want to walk through three scenarios. Okay. And I just want to do this by show of hands. Okay. The first scenario, so in this situation, we're holding the Toyota Camry constant, okay? Its price does not change. It's $20,770. It is our baseline comparable, okay? What is going to change is the price of the BMW. So in this situation, if there is a 0% premium, that means that the price of the Toyota and the price of the BMW are the exact same. Who is going to buy the BMW in this room? 7. Brian? No. John? No? Okay, so 7.
I just think about all the maintenance later.
Yeah, the Toyota's gonna have a better
The
maintenance.
cost doesn't end at 20,000.
If you look at BMW cost repair, it is quite a bit more.
Okay. So 50% premium now. So now the cost of the BMW has risen to $31,155. The Toyota is still the same price. Who still wants to buy the BMW? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Interesting. Now, the last scenario, the actual price premium. Who is willing to pay the full price, $67,959, for the BMW? Michael? All right, we have one luxury customer in the room. Okay, so let me ask you, what does this information give me?
Well, some people will pay the price, I mean, a premium brand will bring a premium price for some people, but with all things being equal, most of us would pay for premium brands. We'll stick with our functional, we'll stick with the Toyota.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll move to the second activity, and perhaps that'll shed a little bit more enlightenment here on what we're doing. So now we're going to do a customer mindset activity. We're going to have the exact same products, Toyota Camry and BMW 740i. But now, instead of asking you for your price preferences, I'm now going to ask you customer mindset questions about these two products, okay? So, for brand awareness, who had never heard of Toyota or BMW before we were in this classroom today? Okay, so from that, we can assume both products have a very high level of brand awareness, right? Everybody's heard of them, everybody is familiar with them. Brand associations. What do you associate? Let's start with the Toyota. What do you associate with the Toyota Camry brand?
Reliability.
Reliability? Anything else? More?
Quality is.
Quality?
Value, what you pay, you get a lot of value.
Money for the group, money for the
Value for
money.
Value for
And I
money?
would even go resale value, because the
Resale
resale
value.
value on those two cars, I mean, one's gonna hold better than the other, and it's gonna be the Toyota.
So, what about the BMW? What are your brand associations with the BMW? What was that?
The ultimate driving
The
machine.
ultimate driving machine.
German, solid,
German Saudi?
solid.
Solid, okay.
Appreciating assets.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was such an anti-BMW crowd.
Actually, first car was old BMW,
Really?
but never been.
So what other brand associations?
A luxury.
Luxury,
Sport.
sporty,
Sport.
performance, that sort of thing. So in terms of your attitude, okay, what is your attitude towards these brands? What is it positive? Is it open? Is it, how do you feel towards the Toyota Camry?
Positive.
Positive?
It's the car almost every accountant drives.
It's what?
Just do not say
We
it.
covered almost every.
That should be their new.
And actually, my mechanic friends as well. And that's why I ended up buying Toyotas, because of my mechanic friends.
So what about the BMW? What is our attitude? What is your attitude towards the BMW 740i? Is it aspirational? Is it
It was until I
luxury
found out about
purchase?
the maintenance from.
I think most people who buy a BMW, it's to project status.
Yeah.
Status symbol.
Okay. So
At
these
least
last
in this
two
one.
categories, it sounds like we have a fair bit of attachment to the Toyota Camry in this room. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. What about the BMW? Anybody feel a particular? You were the one willing to pay $67,000 for it. So do you have, Michael? Do you have a strong attachment or attitude towards the BMW?
I really like the con.
Yeah. Okay. And activity. So activity takes attachment to a whole nother level. Activity is like you're out there recommending this brand, and you know somebody mentioned mechanics recommending Toyotas. You know that's a form of brand activity. You tell your friends, you know, you join the car club, that sort of thing. So that's a whole different level of activity. But so let's step back from those two activities that we just did: price premium and customer mindset. Do you see how the customer mindset activity tells me so much more about what you actually think? Okay? Does that make sense? So, product market measures can give me data-driven information in the market to model brand equity. But that information alone doesn't necessarily tell me why Michael is willing to spend $67,000 on a BMW, even if it's a stretch purchase with a one-time windfall, okay? To understand that, I have to get into all this messy detail and try to understand what's actually going on in the heads of the people who are going to my auto dealership and looking at my cars. Does that make sense? Okay.
But
Well-
didn't you say that there was a high correlation between the two, the customer mindset and the premium?
Yes.
So don't you get to the same conclusion, but now I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of what Brian was talking about. Okay, what can you actually conclude from something like revenue premium? You can't make any of the conclusions we made about these product market measures. To get into this, you'd have to do a study like based on an acre model or a hierarchy of effects model, where you actually look at these driving motivators behind these purchase decisions. The revenue premium simply shows you that those decisions are happening in the market. But to really understand why they're happening, you have to get into these messy details, and that requires actually sitting down with a group like this and actually asking your customers those questions. Okay?
So in terms of creating brand equity, you need to get into the customer mindset. But in terms of measuring it, either method will bring you to the same conclusion.
Well, brand equity is created in the minds of customers. You can only influence brand equity through your marketing investments, okay?
Mhm.
And understanding brand equity helps you refine those investments. But in order to do that, you really have to understand what's going on. And that's really what these discussions are about, okay? And these models are just frameworks for understanding the different dimensions of brand equity, okay? Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it.